My name's Don Capner from Chang Robotics, and I want to welcome everyone to our second in a series of Chang Robotics Brand Calls. And look forward to engaging with all of you. You have the opportunity to send us questions using the Q&A button on the navigation above. And so we look forward to fielding some of your questions and engaging with all of you who are participating in the call today. My role today is both host and moderator. So I look forward to getting right into things. And today we have the opportunity to hear from Matthew Chang, the founder of Chang Robotics. And Matt will favor us with an update at this point, and I'll chime in as needed and look forward to a little bit of dialogue. But Matt, I'll turn things over to you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Don. Yeah, last call, we went over a bit of the project pipeline and some of the heavy-duty engineering work that we're engaged in to really advance our customers and the economy in general in terms of reshoring and automation for U.S. Industry and manufacturing. So today we're going to get into a little bit more of the strategy around the business and some of the things we're working on strategically. So I'll jump into a quick briefing. Here you're going to see a bit of a theme of emerging industries. So the first one we have queued up for today is the production of B100 biodiesel from wastewater treatment plants. That's a pretty exciting project for us. We are in partnership with a company that has developed this technology that is located in Connecticut. And they now have their pilot plant fully up and running with EPA certified and ASTM certified biodiesel coming out of a wastewater treatment plant. And for those that may not necessarily make sense, you say, well, how do you get energy from a wastewater treatment plant? The short answer is the largest waste stream is the oil that ends up in a wastewater treatment plant. And that oil has been an opportunity forever to refine it and create a useful fuel from it, especially a green renewable fuel. However, significant technology challenges have existed because the grease and the fat that ends up at a wastewater treatment plant is very wet, it's very dirty, and it's hard to manage. So traditional systems won't work, and a new approach and a new technology is required. So we are very proud to be engaged in the production of clean, green B100 biodiesel. And the net of what this means is that every city and every municipality in North America and globally can become an energy producer. And that energy can be sold into either municipal uses such as school buses, or it can also be sold into pipelines so that the national supply of diesel is now a blended biofuel, just like gasoline. The second one that we have queued up is around the production of local organic vegetables using urban organic farming techniques. And we're doing this in a modular and capital light fashion. The company here that we've partnered with to help scale their technology is based out of Maricopa County, Arizona. And one of the main drivers for this business is the existence of food deserts. So currently in the national supply chain of vegetables, a lot of our vegetables tend to come from the West Coast, and then they get distributed across the country nationally. The major competition for local production is greenhouse production, which is very expensive and capital intensive and relatively low yield. By going vertical and being able to farm up to 28 rows of vegetables in one footprint, then what we can do is we can produce vegetables in a much faster timeline using LED lighting and hydroponics. And then we can schedule the production according to the offtake demands of major retailers. So when the grocery store wants to have fresh produce, such as spinach, romaine lettuce, arugula, those types of vegetables, we can do our planting so that the harvest happens the day before sale, meaning that every community can have fresh, local, organic vegetables. And it's a big solution to food deserts where a lot of our population in the US doesn't have access to healthy foods in their neighborhoods. And then finally, Kodiak Technologies, which is a very special pet project of Chang Robotics, is leading the charge and has recently taken the mantle of the largest battery electric vehicle on Earth, the most powerful battery electric vehicle on Earth. And what Kodiak Technologies is searching to do is to help government institutions electrify. There's a lot of heavy duty off-road use cases that are currently diesel driven. And if we can get those vehicles and those fleets converted over to battery electric, then we can really move the needle in greenhouse gas reduction and the energy transition in America. So we'll unpack Kodiak Tech more in future meetings, but we'll share with you in the next slide some of the unlocks of how we help our partners go after this. The biggest opportunity right now is federal grants, and it's a space that we are very active in. A couple of our statistics right now is we have 2 grants pending with the National Science Foundation. Both of those are for transformative technologies that are green and good for the environment. We're taking a stewardship mindset towards the economy here, which is to say, hey, we have a limited set of resources on Earth, and the more that we can start to move the needle project by project and product by product towards a greener, more sustainable future, then the better it is for our children and grandchildren. Next, we have 2 Department of Energy grants pending for product development. The Department of Energy is one of the largest recipients of stimulus funding, and they are currently very active in writing a lot of grant programs, which we are participating in. And those activities have led us to be retained by a Fortune 500 company to help them develop their Department of Energy grant strategy and loan strategy through the LPO program office. So that is something that we're very heavily engaged with, and we see it as very strategic where federal government can partner with industry. And then finally, we have some stats for you on airport operations and what it means to electrify government operations, which we'll cover in the next slide. Here we can see exactly what the opportunity is for airports to access some of the stimulus funding that's already been approved. By our calculation, more than $40 billion has been set aside for vehicle electrification and FAA funding, and an additional $8 billion for cities and municipalities through the SMART grant and RAISE grant programs. And what this means is for forward-looking and innovative government operations, there's major opportunities to subsidize a capital project in a major way using federal funding. The secret is knowing how to apply for the federal funds and having a winning formula, which we believe we have, and we look forward to continuing to utilize over the next several years. We learned a statistic last week that of all the stimulus funding that was approved both under President Trump and President Biden, 83% of that funding is still waiting to be approved. A very small percentage has actually been spent. So 17% of it has been allocated to awarded recipients. A small portion of that has actually been spent and hit the street, and 83% is still waiting to be written and approved, which means the opportunity for cities and governments to apply and win is immense. Don, that concludes my section. Oh, I'm sorry, I have one more slide. So we're going to cover the IP studio here, which is our physical location in Evanston, Illinois, located at Northwestern's incubation campus. IP Studio is a company that is owned by Chang Robotics, and it has some major milestones for progress. The first of which is having achieved a patent license with Northwestern University for a proprietary formula that replaces PFAS. For those not familiar with PFAS, we all hear about microplastics and nanoplastics that enter the food supply chain and enter our bodies. There's a lot of questions on what the long-term effects are. So Chang Robotics, via our IP studio, is very proud to be leading the charge in replacing PFAS as a barrier coating in food packaging, which should make a major step forward in removing these micro and nanoplastics from our food supply chain. Additionally, we also have been working on a patent license to use medical grade X-ray technology in food and beverage manufacturing. So one of the things we always look for is how can we cross-pollinate something that exists in one industry and move that over to another industry that's waiting to benefit. So wait for more on that to come. But if you follow the news, you've seen that there's a lot of companies out there looking for advanced imaging in food production and the promises that could hold. And then finally, we are midway through our patent tree development on developing technology for healthcare systems. And we see that healthcare systems are now in a position to benefit from some of the technology that has been developed and deployed in advanced manufacturing and government emerging technologies. So as hospitals are now faced with rising cost and challenges around recruiting labor, we're trying to bring in solutions that help hospitals become more automated and have better experience for workforce, including nurses and doctors, and then better outcomes for patients. Back to you, Don.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that, Matt. And as that was a great segue, and we appreciate the update, especially around this emerging problem discussion of PFAS, and so we're going to dive deeper into that today. And I'm so pleased to be able to introduce our two guest speakers. So the first guest is Tim Way, Dr. Tim Way. Tim and I have known each other for several years. We're both recovering deans from institutions. I'm not quite there, but I'm almost there, finishing out my term at Marshall University before the fall of 2024. But in the case of Tim, more importantly, he was most recently dean at the University of Nebraska's Engineering School, and now sits works with the faculty closely at Northwestern University in Evanston, and also heads up the IP studio location for Chang Robotics. And we have a lab there and an office, and Tim heads that up. He's a visionary leader with 30 years of experience working also with food and beverage manufacturers, and been a successful and prolific grant writer. We also have Paul Boynton, and Paul, I want to welcome you to the Chang Robotics Brand Call today. He's the past president of and CEO of Rainier Advanced Materials, and he's held various roles, including roles at 3M for Scotch-Brite and Post-it notes, which we all know, and has served on several boards, including Brink's Company and the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta's Jacksonville branch. So I want to welcome both of you to the Chang Robotics Call. It's great to have both of you here today.
Thanks, Don. Good to see you. Good to see everybody.
Yeah, great to see you. And Paul, I want to go ahead and start with you. We keep hearing about forever chemicals, okay, and the issues with them. So help us understand a little clearer what these chemicals are and what the issue is as it relates to food packaging.
Yeah, sure. Again, thanks, Don, and hello, everyone. So forever chemicals, right? There are a class of thousands, actually, of synthetic chemicals, technically called per or polyfluoroalkyl substances. So PFAS for short, acronym PFAS for short. You know, they were first developed in the 1940s, and they provided some great functional value. And we all know them, right? So everyday examples like Gore-Tex in clothing, Teflon for nonstick cookware, stain-resistant treatments for furniture. You'll buy a couch or a love seat and they say, do you want it treated for protection? And then, of course, people usually say yes. And coatings for fast food wrappers and takeout food containers. So it's been used everywhere, and that's just a few examples. But PFAS chemicals, Don and everyone, are long-chain polymers. So they don't break down easily with time. And not even after a long time. And that's an advantage, but also it's a real disadvantage. And so the disadvantage is, since they don't break down very well, they are what we would call persistent in the environment. And in fact, with today's advanced instruments that can detect and measure small amounts of PFAS, we've learned that you can find them virtually everywhere, and again, unfortunately, in every one. And some of them, again, unfortunately, have been found to have some long-term health implications. So it's a very long-term persistent chemical out in our environment today that has some adverse health effects.
So Paul, who developed these and why did they originally develop them given what we know now?
Yeah, look, they were developed a long time ago, and we need to remember that all these chemicals were developed with really good intentions. And it's been a lot of companies around the world. It's not just one or a few, it's been a lot. And if I just take, one I just mentioned, for example, Gore-Tex, why was it developed, right? We all know Gore-Tex, and it's a great fabric, that you guys would use in rain gear, hiking gear, whatever, but also has some really incredible applications such as suits worn by firefighters. So a real critical material. In the case of food packaging, PFAS materials like plastics do an incredible job of keeping our food safe. These PFAS they make a real strong product, so it can be used in packaging to protect food contents from damage. But PFAS coatings, if it's applied as a coating, they can form a food packaging barrier, and that helps keep liquids, think about grease and vapors and juices, from leaking out. But it also prevents harmful chemicals and pathogens from getting in. And the net result is really it helps keep food fresh longer. And we have few other materials that are as effective or as affordable as PFAS and plastics for food packaging.
So then maybe focus on what the issue is for the environment going forward, Paul.
Yeah, so again, the properties that are beneficial in some areas, unfortunately, are problematic in others. And the biggest challenge with PFAS substances and plastics in general, for that matter, is they just don't break down very well. So what happens to them? They accumulate in the environment, right? They find their way into our water. We find them absorbed by plants, consumed by animals, or just piling up somewhere on the earth. And all of these are a problem. And it's not a sustainable situation out there.
So Paul, have they been proven to be harmful to humans?
So let me answer this way. Remember PFAS, the F in PFAS is fluorine, which is highly reactive and toxic, right? So in small amounts, minute amounts, like we'd find in fluoride in our toothpaste, it's safe. But if it builds up in our bodies, and even at extremely low levels, it can become toxic. And obviously, if more and more of it is around and we're exposed to it more often, will actually be and actually has become a problem. So there's a growing body of science out there that has found the potential adverse effects associated with PFAS exposure, including, things like liver damage, decreased fertility, and many types of cancer. And in the case of plastics, again, they generally don't break down. So you may be aware, and actually Matthew just mentioned this, a more recent development, plastics called microplastics. They supposedly break down better than traditional plastics through exposure of heat and sunlight. And they break down into these microscopic plastic particles. But again, unfortunately, these microparticles can also build up in animals and humans, creating a host of medical issues because they interfere with the body's natural cellular function. So a lot of issues out there because, again, these are long chain polymers and they just hang around. And now we're finding out when they hang around, they're hanging around in us and they're not good for us.
So how then are governments and industry reacting to this science, these tests, these studies, and some of those harmful effects?
I think what we're seeing, Don, is that governments at all levels are becoming increasingly proactive in banning PFAS and plastics in a wide variety of applications. In fact, in 2020, Denmark became the first country to ban PFAS substances for food packaging. And last year, 2023, European Commission proposed, hasn't been approved yet, a ban of all PFAS substances. In the United States, California a year ago passed AB 1200, which regulates the use of PFAS. And very quickly, 9 other states followed with very similar restrictions. So government regulation is becoming widespread, and it's forcing dramatic changes across a host of industries. And if we want to just think about specific to the food and beverage industry, there's a lot of pressure to come up with alternatives to PFAS. and for that matter, plastics and food packaging, because that is one that's directly connected to our food intake and is a concern. And hence, that's why we're here talking today about graphene oxide.
Wow, so that's interesting. Thanks, Paul. It sounds like these forever chemicals, or I guess more technically PFAS chemicals, have been effective in the past in what they were intended to do, but not necessarily a sustainable product for the environment, nor good for human health. So Tim, pivoting to you, what are the solutions out there, and what is unique about Chang Robotics' license for graphene oxide in food packaging, and how does that fit into the solution as a sustainable alternative to these forever chemicals?
Okay, well, first of all, thanks, Don, and great job, Paul, and just hello to everyone. Let me just sort of start with kind of the competing technologies part first, right? And before I do that, I think maybe I'll back up a little bit and add some background and context. So Paul did a really great job of laying out the challenge and the opportunity that we have. As he said, there's a lot of focus on new food packaging technologies right now. But this is being driven by, and this is being driven by new government regulation, and that regulation's creating an urgency that's extremely challenging, but actually overall, it's a good thing. So the technical challenge really is, how do you make a sustainable, safe replacement that performs as well as plastic or PFAS, but at the same price point? So it's not necessarily hard to come up with replacements. So there's a lot of work that's being done with biopolymers, for example. There's a company that's actually claims to have made a paper bottle, but as we looked into it, we're not exactly sure that they're still not using some sort of plastic in there, at least in the near term, until they really figure this thing out. The problem is the affordability, and this is particularly true in the food and beverage industry, where margins are so small, it just really isn't enough room to absorb additional production or material costs. And the current inflationary pressures that we're facing really aren't making things any easier. So that's really sort of where the industry is right now. Is this challenge and opportunity has arisen, and people are trying to figure out what it is, and there's a number of things being tried, but I think at the end of the day, cost is really what's going to drive the final solution.
That's super helpful in context, Tim. But tell us specifically, what is graphene oxide and how does it work in food packaging? Who developed it, and where are things right now?
Okay. So a few years ago, while I was still a dean of engineering, I was building this public-private partnership, which we call a Transformational Food Manufacturing Initiative. And we were trying to look at the problem of feeding a growing global population by looking at food as an advanced manufacturing industry, because we're engineers, and not purely just as an ag industry. And at that time, I met Professor Sunbin Nguyen, who's a distinguished professor of chemistry at Northwestern. And he approached me with the idea of using graphene oxide as a replacement for plastic and PFAS in food packaging. Right? And so this slide just popped up here. Graphene oxide is a nanomaterial. It's basically carbon with some oxygen and hydroxyl or OH ions attached to it, right? And so while its existence, and you can see in the top left picture, that's a microscope photograph, and you can see the individual sheets of graphene oxide. You see a scale there of I think it was 8 micrometers. So you can see that those sheets are really, really thin. And in the lower right-hand corner, you see this sort of chemical diagram of graphene, which is the thing on the left, which kind of looks like honeycomb. And then graphene oxide has oxygen and OH ions, which is basically, sort of half of water attached to it. Right. So while the existence of graphene oxide really has been known for probably about a century, it was first recognized as an engineering material in 2004, and that publication was awarded the Nobel Prize in 2010. Right. So you see this picture, very, very thin sheets, few nanometers thick. Sunbin was one of the first people to study the characteristics of graphene oxide and how to manufacture it. And so he was working right around the exact same time as that 2004 paper. Two of his papers have been cited in the research literature from 2006 and 2007. Each of those two papers have been cited over 14,000 times each. So in his early work on this subject, Sundman was working on applying graphene oxide to plastic substrates to make really strong, lightweight materials for spaceflight, and also to enhance barrier properties for electronics. So graphene and electronics and energy storage, those are kind of the really big areas. The food is relatively new. And so the idea that we started working on here is to use graphene oxide with a paper substrate as a sustainable replacement for plastic and PFAS in food packaging. Right. And so if we can, as this next image pops up, what you're looking at here is a water drop on a piece of paper that's been infused with graphene oxide. And you can see that the water's beaded up here into a sphere. You can see a couple of other drops off to the side. And that means that the graphene oxide has made the paper repel water. And the scientific term for that is hydrophobic. This actually isn't our work, but it does give you a very visual image of what graphene oxide can do.
Specifically, Tim, what then is unique about this technology, and does graphene oxide work as a replacement for PFAS?
Yeah, so remember that issue of cost. Okay, so the difference between this photo and what we're doing in our labs is that whoever did this work, they used a lot of graphene oxide, right? And their approach was more along the lines of using graphene oxide to fill the gaps between the pulp fibers that make up the paper. So the way we're thinking about that particular this particular photograph is really what they were trying to do is fill the Grand Canyon with buckets of sand, right? And so it works, but it's incredibly expensive. So what we found is that you can get significant barrier performance with hundreds to thousands of times less graphene oxide than what was used in this picture. And sort of the key here is that the underlying science is necessarily different, and that's really the proprietary nature of our solution. But the unlock we have is that we found a way to replace the plastic and PFAS that's currently used in current paper food packaging solutions with something that's actually fully sustainable, but it's no more expensive than existing coating materials. And so I should really add here that in addition to the water barrier properties, we've also shown that graphene oxide has significant oil barrier properties. And as we pop up this third slide here, what I'm showing is this was an experiment we did last summer where we put baby bok choy leaf in a plastic food storage bag. And then we did the same thing with an envelope that we made with a sheet of food packaging paperboard, which we treated with our graphene oxide formulation. And so these pictures that you see across the bottom, what we did is every day I took a photograph of the baby bok choy leaf, and this was actually sitting outside at room temperature. But every day I took a picture, and so what you're looking at is pictures every other day. And you can see that in about 2 weeks, I certainly wouldn't want to eat that bok choy leaf on the far right after 12 days, right? But if you did the same thing, if we advance to the next slide, if you look at the baby bok choy leaf that we put in the treated paperboard envelope, what you can see is after 12 days, it still looks very fresh, right? And I need to point out here that we put a plastic window in the envelope before we started the experiment so you can actually see inside what's happening without opening the envelope. And so you can see there's tremendous potential to use graphene oxide with paper for food freshness. And so from a scientific perspective, this means that the graphene oxide is effective in controlling the transfer of gases across the packaging barrier, as well as water and oil.
So, Tim, is this technology protected in any way?
Yes, absolutely. So we filed well, Northwestern filed a provisional patent for the use of this idea of using small amounts of graphene oxide as a food packaging material. That was filed in 2023. We filed a full non-provisional patent late last year, and we've also filed for the international protections as well.
So is the technology then fully proven, or what needs to be done, and is it now safe for use for food contact?
Well, that's sort of a layered question. At some levels, it's ready for prime time, and then there's some longer term applications which will take a while, and then there's also the safety issues, right? So we're working with several companies across the spectrum, from graphene oxide manufacturers to food and beverage retailers. And we actually have an international paper manufacturer who's been doing industry standard testing for us, and they've confirmed what we found in our lab, that graphene oxide does in fact enhance the water, grease, and gas barrier properties for paper packaging. So our long-term challenge is going to be being able to match the barrier properties of plastic, and I'm actually not sure anybody's been able to come up with an alternative, affordable alternative for that yet. But what we're working on right now is looking at much shorter term applications. So we're looking at enhancing the performance of disposable tableware, like paper plates and cups and straws. And there you just, after 20 minutes, you just want to pick up your cup or your straw and just not get that sort of mushy thing in your mouth, right? Before you finish your drink. Or you're having a picnic and you go off and you play a round of croquet, and you don't want to come back and have your plate sort of fall apart in your lap, right? So that work we're getting quite a bit of traction on that. The focus on the longer time scale, that would be once we really go commercial with the short-term application, then we start refocusing on the long-term food freshness. And then sort of your I'm sorry, I lost my thought. So as we speak, we are working with a paper plate manufacturer, and we're actually into the nitty-gritty of how much graphene oxide do you need to put into a plate, and we're working out the cost and the business questions associated with that. So the key here, though, is that we've created a technology now where we're pretty much demonstrated that you can use the exact same manufacturing equipment and you can use the same processes. You just swap out whatever you're using with this graphene oxide formulation. So there's no additional costs to the materials, and there's no additional capital expenses associated with the switch. Right. And so then the final thing is your question about safety, and I'll throw sustainability on top of that. We've been doing work in our lab, and we have preliminary results which demonstrate that this stuff doesn't transfer to the food. We have a number of industry partners who have come alongside with us. They have experience with showing safety and efficacy of graphene oxide, and they have experience with working with graphene oxide, working with the FDA. So really what we have, one of our next steps, which we're working on now, is just going through the regulatory process so that we have a rigorous demonstration of the safety of graphene oxide. right? And so in summary, this last slide here is we've demonstrated that very small amounts of graphene oxide can be used to replace plastic and PFAS in food packaging. It's safe, it's sustainable, it's actually very strong, it's at a competitive price point, and has the potential to transform food packaging for the future of safe, nutritious, affordable food for a growing global population.
Wow. Congratulations on you and Sunbin and the team there for developing this patent and license, corresponding license for graphene oxide in food packaging. And it sounds like a unique application for a tried and true sustainable product. And you know, it's exciting to think about compostable tableware, disposable tableware. That's amazing. Paul, let me flip this conversation back to you again and maybe wrap some things up. We just heard Tim talk about this patented technology that Chang Robotics has the license for. Where do you see this technology going from an industry perspective, and what do you think the next step might be in commercially developing this graphene oxide as a packaging solution?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the fundamental question is, does graphene oxide address, right, what the market's looking for, Don? And I think the short answer to that is yes, right? So we're living in a world that's become increasingly aware of the adverse effects of many products and many practices that we kind of as a global society have been very comfortable with for over time. And PFAS chemicals are chemicals that remain persistent in the environment for a long time and adverse to human health represent an issue that needs to be resolved. So it's fitting in there. I worked for, as you noted at the very beginning, Don, for 3M for the decade of the 1990s. And 3M was a leading producer of PFAS chemicals. And 3M took a very proactive measure and voluntarily phased out a set of PFAS chemicals in 2000. You may remember them under the brand name as Consumer Scotchgard, right? But here we are today, and the market continues to look to replace these chemicals, just as Tim was talking about, with performance and cost-effective alternatives. So the potential for graphene oxide to serve as a barrier or enhanced barrier to grease and water and food packaging application, it's real and it's exciting, right? So there's no question that a problem has been identified. And as we talked about earlier, increasing government actions it's creating an immediate void between a problem and a solution. So graphene oxide has got the potential to fill that void with a very economically sustainable solution. So it's the right fit for right now.
Very interesting. Well, what do you think the market interest and size of the potential market might be for this solution, and where potentially does this go?
Yeah, so let me first of all, just in a broad statement, the opportunity for replacements for PFAS that we talked about is substantial. So I can give you some boundary thoughts here on how big is this market. So according to Research and Markets, which is a market information provider, over 389,000 metric tons. So think about that number, 380,000 metric tons of fluoropolymers were produced last year, value about $8 billion. They expect that market to grow 5 to 7% annually to almost 10 billion just in 2026. So just very strong growth. And so graphene oxide has a real potential to play a significant role in that market. And further fueling that is that growth potential is the broader industry push away from plastics and food packaging, just as we've been talking about. That's happening. We hear it everywhere. So sustainable paper-based food packaging materials are going to see a disproportionate growth in this industry as a result.
So could graphene oxide then be used in food packaging and kind of paint that picture for us?
Yeah, sure. So graphene oxide has the potential, and Tim talked about the reference to play a key part in the growth of paper-based food packaging solutions. And we got to say, at this stage, we haven't explored all the opportunities of how graphene oxide may be used in food packaging, but we can certainly see many, right? Tim referenced graphene oxide readily applied to products like paper plates and bowls. But also think about this, think about it applied to a paperboard. And when I was at Rainier Advanced Material, we own paperboard lines, right? So I can easily think of how this could be applied to that and put it for like takeout food containers or for paper wrappers for fast food sandwiches, hamburgers, tacos, wraps. There is a large opportunity out there. And as Tim referenced, our challenge is to identify the most cost-effective way to incorporate graphene oxide as part of this sustainable solution.
So who might be some of the potential customers for graphene oxide, and how do you think they might use it to either replace current solutions or to innovate in a new area that is sustainable for the future?
So let's just think about it this way, Don. Let's just kind of talk about the kind of how the broad conversations have been going on for some time now. And we'll start with consumers, people like you and I. We're telling food retailers, right? Think McDonald's, Starbucks, Taco Bell, and the like, right? Saying, hey, I don't want these forever chemicals in my food. I don't want that. I hear about them. I know what they can do. I don't want that. So in turn, these food retailers have told their packaging suppliers, hey, we don't want PFAS chemicals in our packaging. Can you please make them without PFAS? Mm-hmm. So of course, then these food packaging materials producers are saying back to the retailers, like, look, we're committed. We got it. We're going to be phasing out PFAS additives in our product. But honestly, we can tell you it's not easy. I mean, Tim just talked about it. It's just not easy. We don't have a lot of performance equivalent, cost-effective alternatives, right? We can come up with alternatives, but they're not very cost-effective. But I can tell you this, Don, nearly every producer of cellulose-based or paper-based food packaging products has publicly shared their plans to move away from additive PFAS substances or eliminate plastics from their packaging. That's a goal everybody's trying to move towards. So as I look at it, right, from a business guy saying, hey, look, we've got an audience out there looking for answers, and they're willing to listen. And I can tell you so many products I've worked on, whether it's at 3M or at Rainier Advanced Materials, where, can we even get an audience? Well, in this case, we've got an audience. So the timing is excellent. The timing for graphene oxide is excellent. So as a result, we've initiated discussions with some of the leading producers of food packaging materials, and they're interested in more sustainable solutions. So we need to continue to work with them to prove out graphene oxide as a technology that's effective and an economical solution.
So how would, and I'll throw this out and feel free, Tim, also to answer here, but how would Chang Robotics lead or take this technology to market?
Yeah, I'll take a cut, and Tim, if wants to add. So, I think like most technologies in the portfolio, we're looking to take them through a commercialization stage, right? That's a key value we provide. And then most likely, either sell or license the technology to producers or customers or a set of customers. But we're not necessarily looking to foresee to invest capital to produce these technologies themselves. We believe our value proposition is getting these technologies to the point of proven commercialization. And I just think it's an exciting opportunity.
Tim, any thoughts on that? Any thoughts from your perspective?
Well, you guys are the business development folks, but yeah, I mean, I think just to kind of add on a little bit of tactical color to what Paul just said, we've identified actually more than one graphene oxide supplier who can produce this stuff at scale. And so we've already started conversations with them about, how do you guys want to partner and do this into the future? Actually, when we're done with this call, I'm heading back to the lab because we're working with this disposable tableware company, and they've given us some of their pulp, and we're now actually putting it into, we're making sort of the equivalent of their paper plates, right? And so once we get that sort of early adopter and we're building up the supply chain, then basically then now you have all the pieces, people see it work, it's actually in a commercial product, and then you have the discussions of, like Paul said, I don't think we necessarily want to be the ones that are putting this stuff into plates, right? So it'll be some sort of partnership and licensing arrangement, but we're already putting all those pieces together.
But it's amazing to hear that you're at the point of testing this with major manufacturers and folks who do this right now and are trying to move towards a sustainable solution. I love that. Well, thank you both, Paul and Tim. And this was fascinating. It's clear that we live in a society that's increasingly aware of more sustainable solutions and looking for those solutions. And Chang Robotics license for graphene oxide, certainly one of the best tools I've heard about that are promising in terms of what will help in terms of a solution. It appears there's a sizable demand for food packaging with functional properties that graphene oxide can provide or enhance. So congrats to everyone. We look forward to your updates on your progress. Matthew, great to see you back. I want to turn some time over to you for maybe some closing thoughts on today's discussion and what we've talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. And to Paul and Tim and Don, great job moderating. I'm incredibly inspired as a father of young children, and wanting them to grow up and lead long, healthy lives, and to make grandchildren that lead long, healthy lives. I'm very inspired and grateful for the work and innovation that the two of you are bringing to the marketplace. One of the things you can do is, in the name is Chang Robotics. We have a high bias towards automation, but we also have a high bias towards technology, and technology doesn't stop with robots. So that's one of the reasons that we're so invested in futuristic green technologies. There's a couple screenshots up here. You can follow us in the news, and you'll get a pretty wide array of projects and special focuses that we're up to. And we'll go to the next slide. One of the things we want to inspire with this brand call is getting folks involved. The future belongs to all of us, and we all have a role to play. So how can you get involved? It's the classic time, talent, and treasure. You've heard some of the work that we're up to, and you've probably also inferred some of the remaining work that we have to do to get things over the finish line and really start to move the needle. So the first is time. If somebody has an expertise in this area, in this chemistry, in this science, then we absolutely want to hear from you, because we have a big tent mentality. The more people that help, the faster the future arrives for all of us. The next around talent is, you heard a lot about government regulations and scientific research. So if somebody has connections that they can make in government spaces around regulatory, with manufacturers that could value from this but may not know about it, or also academic talents, then we would love to hear from you about that and have you help us network into a faster deployment commercially. And then finally, treasure. For some folks, they may just be in a position where they want to financially support this. So if we move to the next slide, what we're rolling out is the Chang Robotics Fund. That is a new product that we're putting in the marketplace, where each of the technologies we've mentioned today, we did a deep dive on graphene oxide, but we also talked about some other transformative technologies, that the investors in the Chang Robotics Fund will gain access to these technologies and the commercial upside alongside of us. And so that's something that we've opened up just this summer. It's an exciting involvement, and thanks to Don Capener for being the project manager and fund administrator. We are at time now, so we'll go ahead and wrap it on time. And I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank you for your attendance and your support, and we look very much forward to what's coming next.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you to the Chang Robotics team, and especially our guests today, Paul Boynton and Dr. Tim Way. I want to thank everyone for your participation, and look forward to seeing you next month. We'll send out specifics on the time. We will have this on the fourth Wednesday of the month. We'll send out the specifics, same time, 1:30 Eastern. Look forward to seeing everyone with new guests and new updates. We'll see you all in July. Have a great weekend.